So critical thinking for me is foundational to all of the other thinking processes that are necessary to be a solutionary. So without critical thinking, we will not be able to discern what's fact, what's fiction, what's opinion. We need to be able to think critically. So much is coming our way. It is astonishing to me sometimes, just when I'm going through social media, the AI generated images that people think are real. And we need young people to have these critical thinking tools. We've always needed it, but we especially need it now. And then when you have good critical thinking skills, then you are able to discern the systems that come into play that create all of the problems and all of the opportunities around us. And we need to be able to be systems thinkers, and critical thinking lies at the foundation of that. And then to become strategic thinkers, once again, if we don't have good critical thinking and we don't have good systems thinking, we're not going to be able to come up with the best strategies to create change. And if we want to cultivate our creative thinking, it still needs that foundation.
Welcome to the Better Life for Animals podcast, where we amplify the voices of animal advocates, sanctuaries, and changemakers working toward a kinder, more compassionate world. Through powerful stories and expert insights, we shine a light on the efforts to rescue, protect, and advocate for animals. Be sure to subscribe wherever you're watching or listening. Every follower helps us reach more people. And support animal sanctuaries. Enjoy the conversation.
Zoe Weil is the co-founder and president for the Institute for Humane Education. She created the first online graduate programs in humane education, connecting human rights, animal protection, and caring for the environment in partnership with Antioch University. IHE also offers special training and free resources for teachers and change makers to help them teach students how to solve real-world problems. Zoe is a popular speaker at a conference and has given several TEDx talks, including The World Becomes What You Teach. She has written 7 books, such as the bestseller, The World Becomes What We Teach, and the award-winning Most Good, Least Harm, and above all, Be Kind. Zoe, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for being on our show. I just love your body of work, and I appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today.
Thank you, Cheryl. I'm delighted to be here.
Thank you. Tell us, let's just get started with what is a solutionary education, and how is it different from the traditional methods currently used in the United States?
So I'm a humane educator, as you said in the introduction, teaching about the interconnected issues of human rights and environmental sustainability and animal protection. And the goal of that kind of education is to prepare people to be what we call solutionaries, who are able to identify unsustainable, unjust, and inhumane systems and solve problems, and transform those systems in ways that do the most good and the least harm for everyone. And when we say everyone, we mean people and animals and the environment. So we believe that education should all be humane education, and that the very purpose of schooling should be to prepare students to be solutionaries, so that no matter what careers, professions that they go into, they know how to build a world where everybody, all life, can thrive. And so what's different about that kind of education from our current system is that our current system is really oriented toward getting a job and being globally competitive. Now, you can get a job and be globally competitive while still being a solutionary. But if you don't have a solutionary mindset, if this has not been cultivated in your schooling and in education in general, everywhere, if it hasn't been cultivated, you're likely not going to see the impacts of your choices and your work on people, animals, and the environment, because we live in this interconnected, very complex world where we're just not going to know that unless we become good critical and systems thinkers.
You said that education is that one system that can change all of the others. So what policy changes would enable schools to integrate humane education into their current curriculum?
So, yes, we believe that education is the root system underlying all other societal systems. And if we can transform it, then everybody wins. And it's interesting, we don't necessarily need policy changes. What we need is for educators to have the kind of training and awareness that will allow them to integrate this solutionary thinking into their classrooms. And that just doesn't require a policy change. It requires a mindset change and training. So at the Institute for Humane Education, we have a program, we offer a solutionary micro-credential course to educators, and they can go through that course, and no matter what they teach, at what age level, whether kindergarten or college level, or they teach in some non-school setting, they can integrate and overlay and infuse what we call our solutionary framework, which is a 4-phase process, into whatever they're teaching. And so we're seeing that happen around the globe. We're in more than 30 countries right now preparing teachers to do this. In our home state of Maine, we partnered with the Department of Education, and we have trained hundreds of teachers in Maine. Maine's a very small state in terms of population, so hundreds of teachers is a big percentage teachers in Maine to bring this solutionary approach and this framework into their classrooms. So it's not really hard to do. We don't have to change anything but our mindsets and our commitment.
You say that to be a solutionary educator, you really need to begin with yourself, and that you want to teach children that a just, healthy, and peaceful world is possible. How important is it that we maintain a sense of hope and optimism for our future?
It's important. I'm going to tell you a story. So about 12 years ago, I was invited to speak to some middle school students at a school in Connecticut. And when I got there, the fifth and sixth graders were sitting there ready to hear what I had to say. And I started by asking them what they thought were the biggest problems in the world. And their answers filled a whiteboard, and it was a big whiteboard. I mean, they articulated the same problems that adults articulate. One boy even said sex trafficking, and he had not been learning about that in school. So after they had listed all of these problems, then I asked them to raise their hands if they thought we could solve them. And of the 45 children in that room, only 5 raised their hands. Only 5 could even imagine us solving the problems they listed. And that was the most sobering moment in my decades of work as a humane educator, because I thought, if these kids can't even imagine us solving these problems, what is going to motivate them to try? Now, this was 12 years ago. So this was before the pandemic. This was before Chat GPT. This was before kids were as aware as they are today of all of the problems in the world. So it's only gotten worse. This sense of despair and hopelessness has only gotten worse. So what I realized I had to do something pretty quickly. So what I did was I asked them to close their eyes, and I asked them to imagine themselves very old and at the end of a long and well-lived life. And I described the future to them. And it was a future in which they were sitting on a park bench on a beautiful day, and the air was clean, and the birds were singing, and waterways around them were clean, and there hadn't been a war in as long as they could remember. And we had learned to treat each other and other animals with respect and compassion and kindness, and nobody went to bed hungry. And so I'm painting this whole picture. And then I asked them to imagine a child coming up and joining them on the park bench. And the child had been learning history in school and learning about much darker times and wanted to know, how did everything change for the better? So the child asks them all these questions, and then the child asks a final question, which is, what role did you play in helping to bring about this better world? What did you do? So while these kids had their eyes closed and they're imagining all this in their minds, I asked them to now raise their hands if they could imagine us solving the problems that they'd listed on the whiteboard. And this time, 40 hands went up in the air. All it took to restore their hope was a vision of a better world and knowing they played a part in it. So I think one of the things that's so important for young people to realize is despite everything that we are facing right now and all the potential catastrophes and all of the issues that are tugging at our hearts and worrying us, a lot has changed for the better. I mean, when I was born, smog and soot coated the streets of our cities, and our waterways were burning. They were literally catching on fire. And now the air and waterways in the United States are by and large cleaner. And that's in my own lifetime. When I was born, about half of the people in the world lived in extreme poverty. And now that's below 10%, still way too high, but better. When I was born, it was legal to discriminate based on race. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
there are so many changes. Nobody was thinking about animal rights issues when I was born. And now a Gallup poll says that most people in the US think that animals should be accorded some rights and be protected from cruelty. So I am not Pollyannish about this. Many, many things have not changed for the better. And many of the things that have changed for the better, we still have a long way to go, and we've backtracked on a number of them. But this is just to say that things can be bad and better at the same time. And if they can be better, they can be better still. And we need to remember that. And we need to remember that we can play a role in bringing the arc of the moral universe toward a more just and humane and sustainable future.
I love how you've phrased all of that because as an adult, I get worked up sometimes about this. But if as an educator, I would want my children to be positive and to feel empowered and to, lay on my, you know, gloominess that will not serve them and they can manifest from something, with all the possibilities like you've laid out. That's very beautiful.
Can I
How,
just say one more
yes,
thing about
please,
that?
please do.
So after speaking at that school in Connecticut, 3 years later, I was speaking at a conference in Guadalajara, Mexico. And the day before the conference began, I was invited to visit the school that was hosting the event. And when I got there, they said, "Hey, will you talk to our fifth graders?" So I hadn't been planning that. And when I walked in, I just thought, let's see what happens here if I ask these kids if they think we can solve the problems in the world. So I asked them that question, and every hand flew up in the air. So, what was different about those fifth graders in Mexico and the fifth graders in Connecticut? What was different was that their teacher had been teaching them in age appropriate ways about problems, specifically environmental problems in that class. And those kids had been involved in solving them. They knew problems could be solved because they were learning to be solutionaries. So if ever we think, oh, we need to protect kids from the ills in the world and we can't teach about this stuff, we absolutely can teach about these issues as long as it's done in age appropriate ways and as long as it's done in a solutionary way where the inquiry leads to action, where students can devise their solutions and implement their solutions, and in the process, develop their agency and feel empowered to make a difference.
Beautiful. So, how important is critical thinking? And are you concerned that the trend to shy away from anything perceived as controversial is going to get in the way?
So, critical thinking for me is foundational to all of the other thinking processes that are necessary to be a solutionary.
Okay.
So, without critical thinking, we will not be able to discern what's fact, what's fiction, what's opinion. We need to be able to think critically. So much is coming our way. It is
Mhm.
astonishing to me sometimes just when I'm going through social media, the AI generated images that people think are real. And we need young people to have these critical thinking tools. We've always needed it, but we especially need it now. And then when you have good critical thinking skills, then you are able to discern the systems that come into play that create all of the problems and all of the opportunities around us. And we need to be able to be systems thinkers, and critical thinking lies at the foundation of that. And then to become strategic thinkers, once again, if we don't have good critical thinking and we don't have good systems thinking, we're not going to be able to come up with the best strategies to create change. And if we want to cultivate our creative thinking, it still needs that foundation of critical thinking. So it's so incredibly important. And I personally believe that schools are one of the best places to be talking about controversial issues, as long as the teacher in the school is not biasing students to think in a certain way, but is helping students to think about whatever issues, whatever controversial issues there are, in ways where they are bringing critical and systems and strategic and creative thinking, and where they are reaching out to people with different perspectives, and where they are talking to a variety of stakeholders. The tendency in our schools is to think, well, we can talk about controversial issues if we do it in the debate format. And I personally don't think the debate format is a healthy way to talk about controversial issues, because the debate format it's fabricated. It creates a binary between two fabricated positions. And it asks people, like, choose a position and then research it and argue your position. So I started thinking about this after I was driving in my car and I was listening to the radio. This was many years ago. And there was an advertisement for an upcoming debate that was going to be held at New York University through the Intelligence Squared series. And the debate topic was whether or not the United States was responsible for Mexico's drug wars. And I just remember being very surprised as I heard that that was a debate topic, because I thought, well, Mexico's drug wars, that's very complex. There are a lot of issues. It's not a binary of like, why would we bring together these experts to argue one side or the other of this fabricated either or statement, rather than bringing experts together to talk about, how do we solve this problem of Mexico's drug wars? What are the underlying causes, the economic causes, the political causes, the media causes, just the many, many systems? Or what if we brought people together to talk about, how we solve the issue of drug use and overdose and deaths? Like, these are really complex problems, and they deserve more than people in an audience listening to a fabricated argument and then voting on who won the argument. And that happens in schools. My own son's high school, one of the requirements for graduation was participating in a debate just like this. You're going to be assigned one side or the other. You're supposed to, research, argue, and then your goal is to win the debate. And I just thought, imagine if we had solutionary teams where people come together and the goal is, how do we solve these underlying problems? So school is a fantastic place for that to happen.
You're listening to Better Life for Animals podcast. Our mission is to amplify the voices of animal advocates, sanctuaries, and changemakers working toward a kinder, more compassionate world. But we can't do it alone. We need your help. First of all, go ahead and subscribe to this channel wherever you're watching or listening. And then get involved by visiting betterlifeforanimals.com. That's betterlifeforanimals.com. Be sure to check out our blog, learn more about incredible sanctuaries, and explore our book section, where 100% of net proceeds from book sales are donated to sanctuaries. Every action you take helps to make a difference. And remember, subscribe to this channel. And now back to the show.
If you're just joining us, this is Better Life for Animals, and we're speaking with Zoe Weil of the Institute for Humane Education. I am interested in talking about the interdisciplinary aspects of education. I read how, we're learning math, and then we're learning science, and then we're learning English, whereas you have these wonderful ideas to create excitement in a solutionary way where maybe even the whole school would get involved in one large topic and may perhaps be broken down by age and create a big solution.
Yeah.
Maybe you could share your thoughts on that.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so imagine let's just look at the problem of school cafeterias, right? Which are, when I say the problem, it's because school cafeterias have lots of problems embedded in them. They don't tend to offer the healthiest, most sustainable, most humane foods. They're often serving those foods on disposable plates and using plastic utensils. The setting of the cafeteria may not be conducive to conversation because it's long, skinny tables instead of round tables where people can have conversation. There's so many things that could be analyzed in the school cafeteria. What's offered in the vending machines. So imagine if the entire school were looking at aspects of the school cafeteria with the goal of helping the cafeteria to become the most sustainable and humane and just cafeteria possible. So the students are going to be learning all sorts of things. They're going to learn about our food production system. They're going to learn about our political system. They're going to learn about our economic system. They're going to learn about our healthcare system, our education system. They're going to have to use numeracy and literacy and critical thinking and statistics and all sorts of different topics. And then they could be involved in learning good communication techniques, research techniques, presenting to their school board or to their community or to their legislators about different issues. And they could be part of changing what happens in a part of their lives that affects them literally every day, Monday through Friday. And the learning that would happen and the empowerment that would happen would be profound. And so many subjects, math and science and language arts, would all be integrated.
I love that. You do speak a lot about the true cost of things, and I'm wondering if you could fill us in on how you can educate children about, this apple and this burger may cost the same, but that's where it ends.
Yeah, so True Price is one of my very favorite humane education activities because it's super stretchy. I can describe it here, which I will do in just a couple minutes, and it can also be somebody's dissertation getting their
Right.
PhD, right? Like it's that stretchy. So in True Price, we look at an everyday object, and it could be a fast food burger, could be an apple, and we ask, what are the effects, both positive and negative, and from procurement through the end of its life cycle on us as individual consumers, on other people, on animals, and on the environment. And then we ask, what are the systems that make this item so commonplace? And what would be an alternative that does more good and less harm? And what systems would need to change to make such alternatives commonplace? So that is the activity. And you can do it with anything, an article of clothing, an electronic device, something you eat, a disposable water bottle, any of these things. I do talk a lot about the apple and the cheeseburger costing the same amount of money, which is astonishing, right? So how is
Astonishing.
it even possible? Now, it's not so much true right now. So fast food burgers have gone up in price, and an organic apple is, maybe $1, $1.50. You used to be able to get a fast food burger for $1. Some places you probably still can. but the very fact that that could be is because of all of these systems, in our economic, our political, our media, like all of these interconnected systems, and the fact that we subsidize a food industry that makes us sick. We don't subsidize organic apples, but we do subsidize fast food burgers. So even though there's vast amounts of feed crops fed to cows, then you produce the cows, then you slaughter the cows, then you truck the cows, then you refrigerate the meat. I mean, and you transport it around the globe, and it has to stay refrigerated. It's really makes no sense that it costs as little as it does. And the reason it costs as little as it does is because all of us taxpayers are funding it. So
Such a shame.
yeah. Anyway, True Price is a great activity. You can do it in your home with your friends and family. Like literally just take something and ask those questions. And for anybody who's thinking, I've forgotten those questions, you can go to our website, humaneeducation.org, and type into the search True Price, and the activity will pop up and you can download the activity.
Thank you for bringing that up because I have to tell you, I'm not an educator per se. I am a grandmother, however, and I have so admired your work. And I think there was a moment where I was even going to sign up. And then I thought,
Oh,
well, I'm not an educator, but you know, the fact that you can bring this into your own life and share it, and it becomes a part of your advocacy, I think.
yes. And
So
Sharon,
I,
you absolutely are an educator because we are all educators. And if you're a grandma, well, that's a huge incentive to be an
ex-
educator. So yeah, and our programs are for anybody who wants to teach in any capacity. So you don't have to be a classroom teacher. But
no.
and most of the people in our graduate programs, which we have people around the globe because they're offered online, most of the people in our graduate programs are not classroom educators.
Okay, well, that's good to know. I'm going to think about that again.
Awesome.
I think you know that one of the things we like to focus on here at Better Life for Animals is the wonderful work that sanctuaries are doing. And you know, I'm a city girl. I didn't grow up around farm animals, but I think if I had had more opportunities as a child to see them in their natural state, I might have made a different choice sooner. I wonder what you think about that because you talk so much about education being flat, you know, and boring, as opposed to it could be so filled with curiosity and, you know, field trips. And how do you feel that, you know, sanctuaries and children getting to be with animals as they actually are could benefit?
Oh my gosh, so much, right? So I hope that all sanctuaries have a full-time humane educator and
Mm,
active humane education programs. So that because that is the biggest impact sanctuaries can have, right? Sanctuaries can only save so many animals. They can only get to be a certain size, but
right.
they can save vastly more animals by having robust humane education programs where students, and not just children, but anybody can come and learn. I mean, I can only imagine how much sooner I would have become vegan if I had visited any kind of farmed animal sanctuary as a child.
Exactly.
You
Same
know,
here. Yeah.
I I had a friend who was a sheep in high school. I visited this sheep every week. I loved this sheep. I named him Woolly Baba. Very original name, I realize. And Woolly Baba would come running to me whenever I arrived.
Oh,
I love that sheep so much. And my very favorite food as a kid was lamb chops, which we only had on special occasions. And I had to make that connection myself, and it took a very long time for me to make that connection. I was still eating lamb chops while I loved Woolly Baba. So if I had visited a sanctuary, I would have learned that connection right away. And I grew up in New York City, so it was really easy not to. I didn't even know that chicken that I ate came from chickens. I didn't know that. I,
no.
and lamb chops, it took me a long time to know that. So I think that sanctuaries can be just profound places for young people to make that connection. And, the vast majority of children love animals. They don't want to hurt animals.
No. Well, I think I've heard you say also that the vast majority of people don't intentionally set out to hurt anything, and yet we hurt things all day long.
Right, exactly. And it becomes more challenging to make changes as we get older. Our habits get just more entrenched, and children don't have the same number of years of habit forming. So I find it generally easier to uh, to inspire people to change when they're younger than when they're older. But again, hardly across the board. I recently made a new friend, and this amazing man who donated a kidney when he was 26 years old to a stranger. That level of generosity and altruism. And, he's now in his late 30s. And I asked him if he were vegan or vegetarian because I was curious. Like, if you're willing to donate a kidney to a stranger, I would imagine that, through your food choices, you'd want to minimize harm. Anyway, he was neither vegan nor vegetarian, but we were at an event together for a period of days. And at the end of that, he said to me, I have something to give you. And because I was giving him a card it was just a thank you card for my time with him. And the thing he had to give me was 4 words. And the 4 words were, I am a vegetarian.
Oh,
So,
that's
he made
beautiful.
that change as
Yeah.
an adult because of making these connections.
If humane education were mandated in schools, how might factory farming rates shift in, say, 10 years?
Well, I think there's going to be a combination of reasons why factory farming ends, and I believe it will end.
As
One
do
of the
I.
sad realities is that most people, even when they find out about the cruelty that has gone into the foods they eat, don't change their diets. Most people do not, even when they know. And so I think there are going to be a number of impacts. So humane education is definitely going to be one of those things because, if young people learn to be solutionaries, they're going to change food systems. Those who go into food systems are going to change them. And how are they going to change them? I think things like cultivated meat, plant-based meat, all of these alternative proteins, that's going to be a huge shift. Because for anybody who's like, yeah, I know it's really awful, but I'm not changing because I'm not willing to sacrifice my desires for my values, which is what it often comes down to. If they don't have to sacrifice their desires, they'll make the shift. So I think that many forces will come into play for making that shift. Humane education will be one of them. Educating a generation of solutionaries will be one of them. And then all of the different kinds of food options that we will have because of those solutionaries will be one of them.
Excellent. Is there any way that we can support you? How can people find you? And what message would you like to impart as we are coming to a close?
So people can find us at our website, humaneeducation.org. And I just want to say that I have a new book that's out called The Solutionary Way: Transform Your Life, Your Community, and the World for the Better. It has a foreword by Jane Goodall, which was an incredible honor. And I just mentioned that book because for those who are listening who are not in the field of education and they're thinking, I want to be a solutionary, like I'm not going to be a teacher, but I want to be a solutionary, that book will help you to find your own path toward being a solutionary on behalf of animals and any other issues that you care about. So I invite people to find that book.
Excellent. I will be looking that book up for sure. So thank you so much for being on our show today. And for those of you who are listening to Better Life for Animals, if you could like and subscribe, it will help us to create a better life for animals.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Thank you for joining us on the Better Life for Animals podcast. Together, we can create a world where all beings are treated with dignity, respect, and care. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and review wherever you're listening. It helps us reach more people and spread awareness about the incredible work happening in animal sanctuaries. You can also share this episode with friends and fellow advocates to keep the conversation going. Until next time, keep speaking up, taking action, and making a difference for the animals.